My family called me an embarrassment every single holiday, mocking my career. So, when I bought a luxurious condo, I threw a massive party and excluded them completely. When they found out, I set a trap they never saw coming. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Kin and Karma. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The fever broke somewhere around 3 in the morning, leaving me shivering in the dark of my cramped, poorly insulated apartment. I had been battling a severe case of the flu for 5 days, my body finally giving out after pulling back-to-back 80-hour weeks at my tech firm. As a senior software architect, my job was demanding, but it was also the only sanctuary I had ever truly known. I pulled the heavy, damp comforter up to my chin, my head pounding with a relentless, rhythmic ache. I reached blindly for the glass of water on my nightstand, knocking my phone off the edge in the process. It landed on the hardwood floor with a sharp clatter, the screen lighting up the darkened room. Groaning, I leaned over to pick it up. My eyes strained against the sudden brightness. There was a single notification, a 3-minute voicemail from my mother, Liliana. I hesitated. A call from Liliana at this hour usually meant one of two things: a manufactured crisis regarding my younger sister, Victoria, or a thinly veiled demand for money disguised as maternal concern. Given how weak I felt, my chest rattling with every breath, I considered swiping the notification away. But the deeply ingrained, pathetic urge to be a good daughter won out. I tapped the screen and held the speaker to my ear. There was no greeting. Instead, the audio was muffled at first, the sound of fabric rustling and ice clinking against glass. It was a pocket dial. I was about to hang up when I heard Victoria's unmistakable, high-pitched laugh piercing through the background noise. "I still can't believe she actually thinks she's important," Victoria's voice echoed through the tiny speaker. "Sitting in that depressing little shoebox apartment, staring at screens all day. It's pathetic." My breath hitched. I froze, the glass of water completely forgotten. "She has zero social grace, darling," Liliana replied, her tone dripping with the elegant condescension she had perfected over decades. "She's always been the embarrassment of this family. No husband, no style, just typing, but we must tolerate her. Waylon, did you manage to get the paperwork sorted?" A deep, smooth voice chimed in, Waylon, Victoria's husband. "It's done, Liliana. The broker didn't even bat an eye. Since Julia has top-tier credit and a massive income history, listing her as the primary guarantor for our new estate was incredibly easy. I just copied her signature from the tax forms she helped us with last year." The room spun. A wave of nausea washed over me that had absolutely nothing to do with the flu. "Are you sure she won't find out?" Victoria asked, a hint of nervous excitement in her voice. "If she sees the credit inquiry, she might actually grow a spine and throw a tantrum." "Let her," Liliana scoffed cruelly. "What is she going to do? Cut us off. She's terrified of being entirely alone. Besides, once the house closes next week, it'll be too late. The mortgage will be tied to her accounts. If she protests, we'll simply remind her that families help each other, and since she clearly has no life of her own to spend her money on, it's only fair she invests in ours." Waylon chuckled, a dark, greasy sound. "Exactly. She's a workhorse. We're just directing the plow. Cheers to the new house, ladies." The clinking of glasses rang out like a death knell in my silent bedroom, followed by 3 agonizing minutes of them casually discussing the interior design of a multi-million-dollar suburban mansion that I was unwittingly financing. They spoke about my life, my hard work, and my total lack of worth with casual, breathtaking cruelty. The recording finally cut off with a sharp beep. I sat there in the dark, the phone heavy in my trembling hand. My chest felt tight, not from the illness, but from a profound, shattering grief. For years, I had endured their snide remarks at every Thanksgiving, every Christmas. I had swallowed the insults about my wardrobe, my introverted nature, and my chosen career path. I had done it all because I believed, foolishly, that beneath the abrasive exterior, they were still my family. I believed they loved me in their own flawed way. But this wasn't just disrespect. This was a calculated, malicious theft of my financial future. They had forged my signature to secure a massive loan for a lifestyle they could never afford, lie intending to let me shoulder the ruin if Waylon's phantom investments fell through again. They saw me not as a daughter or a sister, but as a bank account to be drained and discarded. As the cold reality of their fraud settled over me, my tears of sorrow rapidly solidified into a hardening shell of absolute fury. Their laughter over my forged signature cut deeper than any illness ever could. The true disease was my family. The morning sun filtered through the cheap blinds of my apartment, casting harsh lines across the floorboards. I hadn't slept a single second since the voicemail. The physical toll of the flu was entirely eclipsed by the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Liliana's haughty voice dismissing my entire existence. I dragged myself out of bed, my joints aching in protest, and made my way to the kitchen. The space was small, the counters chipped, but I loved it because I paid for it with money I had earned through sheer intellect and dedication. As I poured myself a cup of black coffee, my hands shook. The sheer audacity of their plan was staggering. A primary guarantor on an estate mortgage. If Waylon defaulted, which, given his track record of failed startups and imaginary ventures, was a mathematical certainty, the bank would come directly after my assets, my savings, and the down payment I had spent the last 5 years quietly accumulating for my own dream home. A sharp knock at the door startled me. I tightened the belt of my robe and looked through the peephole. It was Liliana. I took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing my face into a mask of sickly innocence, and unlocked the door. Liliana swept into the room, bringing with her the overwhelming scent of expensive, heavy perfume. She was impeccably dressed in a tailored cream pantsuit, her hair perfectly coiffed, looking entirely out of place in my modest hallway. She held a small plastic container of what looked like store-bought chicken soup at arm's length, as if it might contaminate her. "Good heavens, Julia," Liliana said, her nose crinkling in immediate distaste as she surveyed my appearance. "You look absolutely dreadful. Have you even brushed your hair today?" "I have the flu, Mother," I rasped, my voice thick. "I've been in bed." "Well, you could at least make an effort. The environment in here is positively stifling." She placed the plastic container on the edge of the kitchen counter, wiping her fingers on a tissue she pulled from her designer handbag. "I brought you some soup. Victoria was terribly worried about you. She has such a soft, empathetic heart, you know." The hypocrisy was suffocating. I stared at the soup, imagining the laughter they had shared just hours prior. "Thank you, that's very thoughtful of Victoria." "Yes, well," Liliana sighed, pacing slowly around my small living room, her eyes darting across my desk, where several file folders and a stack of mail were sitting. "She's extremely busy, of course. Organizing a household, managing Waylon's high-profile social calendar. Speaking of which, Waylon mentioned he needed to verify a minor detail regarding that tax question you helped him with last year. Something about your social security number needing to be re-entered on a background check form for his new firm. Do you have your ID handy?" It was so smooth, so terrifyingly casual. She was standing in my home, pretending to care for her sick daughter, while actively attempting to steal the final piece of documentation they needed to finalize their fraud. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. "My wallet is in the bedroom," I lied, keeping my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. "But I'm far too exhausted to dig through it right now. Tell Waylon I'll call him when I feel better." Liliana's smile tightened, a momentary flash of genuine annoyance cracking her polished facade. "Julia, really? It will only take a second. Don't be difficult. Waylon is doing very important work, and you should be grateful he even involves you in his financial sphere." "I said I'll do it later, Mother," I replied, putting a fraction more firmness into my tone. She stared at me, her eyes cold and calculating before letting out a long, dramatic sigh. Fine, suit yourself. You always have to make everything a struggle, don't you? It's no wonder you're sitting here all alone. I'll tell Waylon you're being uncooperative. She turned and marched toward the door, her heels clicking sharply against the wood. Eat the soup, Julia, and try to air this place out. It smells like stagnation. The door slammed shut behind her. I stood in the silence, staring at the closed door, my chest heaving. She had looked right into my feverish eyes and lied without a single ounce of remorse. They thought I was weak. They thought I was nothing more than an oblivious, submissive drone who spent her life typing at a screen. They assumed my quiet nature was a symptom of stupidity. But I had forgotten one crucial thing. I build complex, impenetrable systems for a living, and I know exactly how to tear them down. To understand the magnitude of this betrayal, one must understand the foundation of our family dynamic. For as long as I could remember, I was the designated workhorse, the pragmatic, unglamorous pillar holding up the glittering tent of my family's delusions. When Victoria wanted a destination wedding in Tuscany that our parents couldn't afford, it was my boring tech job bonuses that quietly covered the caterer and the venue. When Liliana insisted on renovating her kitchen to keep up with her country club friends, I was the one who quietly transferred the funds under the guise of an early inheritance from an anonymous aunt. I paid for the privilege of their company, buying their conditional tolerance with every wire transfer. And in return, every holiday dinner became a roast where I was the main course. I was the cautionary tale, the spinster who chose servers and code over socializing and status. But the true poison in the well was Waylon. Waylon had entered our lives 5 years ago, sweeping Victoria off her feet with grand promises and expensive dinners that, I later discovered, were paid for with heavily maxed-out credit cards. He presented himself as a venture capital consultant, a title as vague as it was pretentious. He wore suits that cost more than my first car, spoke entirely in corporate buzzwords. Synergy, disruptive market capture, leveraging assets, and possessed a frightening ability to make people believe his absolute nonsense. He was a parasite wrapped in a silk tie, and my mother worshipped him. Later that same afternoon, while I was sitting at my laptop pulling my official credit reports, my intercom buzzed. I didn't answer. A minute later, a heavy, confident knock hammered against my apartment door. I dragged myself up and looked through the peephole. It was Waylon. I opened the door just a crack, keeping the chain engaged. "Julia, how's my favorite sister-in-law doing?" Waylon boomed, his voice entirely too loud for the narrow hallway. He was wearing a bespoke navy suit, a fake Rolex gleaming aggressively on his wrist. His smile was wide, showing perfectly veneered teeth, but his eyes were flat and unreadable. "I'm sick, Waylon," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "What do you want?" "Liliana said you were being a little stubborn this morning," he chuckled, leaning his weight casually against my door, trying to push it open against the chain. I held firm. I was just in the neighborhood meeting with some high-net-worth clients and thought I'd pop by. We really need to finalize that background check detail, Jules. It's holding up a massive portfolio acquisition for me. "I don't have the energy to look for documents right now," I said, my eyes locking onto his. Waylon's smile didn't waver, but his jaw clenched slightly. "Come on, Julia, it's just a social security number. You have an eidetic memory for code, I know you know it by heart. Just write it down for me. We're family. We operate on trust, right?" He tried to peek past me into the apartment, his gaze sweeping over my living room. "You know, with your income level, you really shouldn't be living in a place like this. Have you looked into diversifying your liquid assets? I could manage a portfolio for you, get you out of this dump. I hear your firm vests a ton of equity for senior roles. You shouldn't just let that sit there." The sheer greed radiating from him made my stomach turn. He wasn't just here for the guarantor signature. He was actively casing my life, looking for the next vein to tap. He viewed my hard-earned equity as his personal rainy day fund. "My assets are perfectly fine where they are, Waylon," I said, my voice dropping to a cold, deadpan register. And I don't mix family with finances. Waylon laughed loudly, a sharp, dismissive sound. Oh, Jules, you're so naive about the real world. Money is just a tool. It's meant to be leveraged by people who know how to use it. Now, be a good girl and get me that number so I can get back to doing the heavy lifting for this family. No, I said simply, I'm going back to bed. Before he could protest, I slammed the door in his face and slid the deadbolt into place. I stood there, listening to him curse softly on the other side before his heavy footsteps retreated down the hall. I walked back to my desk and looked at the glowing screen of my laptop. My credit report was open. There it was, a hard inquiry from a high-end luxury mortgage lender executed 2 days ago. They really had done it. They had forged my signature to steal a house. I closed the laptop gently. The sadness was completely gone, burned away by the white-hot clarity of what I had to do. They wanted to play games with my livelihood. They wanted to leverage my life for their own gain? Fine. But they were about to learn that when you try to hack a M. Aster Architect's system, you don't just get locked out. You get destroyed. The morning after Waylon's visit, the remnants of my flu had finally burned away, replaced by an intense, hyper-focused energy. I sat at my home workstation, a curved, triple-monitor setup that Liliana always referred to as my gaming toys, and cracked my knuckles. They had made a fatal miscalculation. They assumed that because I was quiet, because I avoided their petty dramas, I was defenseless. They did not understand that my entire career was built on identifying vulnerabilities in complex systems, securing them, and neutralizing threats. And right now, Waylon was a piece of malware that had infected my family's network. I started by freezing my credit across all 3 major bureaus. It took less than 15 minutes, but the implications were massive. By placing a hard lock on my social security number, any pending mortgage applications relying on my credit history would instantly hit a brick wall. But I knew that simply stopping the loan wasn't enough. If I only blocked the transaction, Waylon would spin a web of lies. He would blame the bank, the economy, or some imaginary clerical error. Liliana and Victoria would believe him, and he would just find another way to drain them dry. I needed to dismantle him completely. I picked up my phone and dialed a number a colleague had given me years ago, a corporate attorney named Marcus, who specialized in high-stakes financial fraud and asset recovery. Marcus speaking, a sharp, gravelly voice answered on the second ring. Marcus, my name is Julia. I'm a senior architect at Veridian Dynamics. David from engineering gave me your number. I need your help. Someone is attempting to fraudulently list me as the primary guarantor on a multi-million-dollar estate mortgage using forged signatures. There was a brief pause on the other end. Do you know who the individual is, Julia? Yes, I replied, my voice steady and cold. My brother-in-law. I see. That makes it messy, Marcus said, the sound of keyboard clacking echoing through the line. Have you confronted him? No, and I don't intend to until I have him cornered. I have already frozen my credit, which will trigger an alert on his end eventually. But before that happens, I need to know everything about him. Every failed business, every hidden debt, every lie he's ever told my sister. Can you recommend an investigator who works quickly? I have someone who used to work forensic accounting for the FBI, Marcus replied, a hint of approval in his tone. Her name is Sarah. She's expensive, and she doesn't do cut-rate work. Money is absolutely not an issue, I assured him. It was the truth. Over the past 6 years, while my family mocked my lifestyle, I had been quietly saving my substantial bonuses and stock dividends. I had amassed enough liquid capital to comfortably purchase a property outright in the city's most exclusive high-rise development, the Sovereign. It was a dream I had kept entirely to myself, knowing that if Liliana found out, she would instantly demand I use the money to upgrade Victoria's life instead. As I hung up the phone and wired the massive retainer fee to Marcus and Sarah, I realized something profound. For years, I had held off on buying my dream condo, subconsciously afraid of the backlash from my family. But listening to that voicemail had severed the last thread of my misplaced guilt. I wasn't going to hide my success anymore. I opened a new tab on my browser and pulled up the contact information for my real estate broker. It was time to close on the penthouse. The ultimate sanctuary for my new life, and the perfect stage for their reckoning. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with an aggressive series of text messages from Liliana. "We are having a family dinner at Victoria's tonight. You need to be there. Waylon is cooking his famous risotto. Don't make excuses about your little cold. 7:00 p.m. sharp." I stared at the screen, a tight smile playing on my lips. They were getting desperate. The credit freeze must have caused a hiccup in Waylon's flawless plan, and now they needed to strong-arm me in person to lift the security lock. I dressed carefully, opting for a sharp, tailored blazer and dark jeans, clothing that I felt powerful in, completely ignoring Liliana's endless demands that I wear pastel dresses. Victoria and Waylon lived in a sprawling, ostentatious rental home in the suburbs, a place filled with rented designer furniture and empty wine bottles meant to project wealth. When I arrived, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. Liliana was aggressively rearranging a vase of wilting lilies in the foyer, while Victoria paced nervously by the kitchen island, twisting a diamond ring that I suspected was cubic zirconia. "Well, look who finally decided to join the living," Liliana said, her eyes immediately darting up and down my outfit in disapproval. "You're wearing jeans to a family dinner. Honestly, Julia, you have no sense of occasion." "Hello, Mother, Victoria," I said, ignoring the bait. I walked past them and into the kitchen. Waylon was standing by the stove, stirring a pot with exaggerated theatrical motions. He wore an apron that said Grill Master, though he was indoors. "Jules, glad you could make it," Waylon boomed, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. There was a frantic, tight energy radiating from him. "Pour yourself a glass of wine. We need to have a little chat before we eat." "I'll pass on the wine," I said, leaning against the doorframe, crossing my arms over my chest. "What do we need to chat about, Waylon?" He wiped his hands on a towel and walked over to me, leaning in close, trying to use his height to intimidate me. "I got a very strange call from the broker today, Julia. He said there was a security block on your credit file. Something about a freeze. I assume you were just messing around with some tech stuff and hit the wrong button." "No," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. "I placed a hard freeze on my credit. Identity theft is a major issue these days. I have to protect my assets." Waylon's jaw clenched, a muscle feathering rapidly near his ear. "Right. Well, it's causing a massive headache for my new venture. I need you to lift it. Tonight. Just log into your little computer and take it off so we can finalize the paperwork." "What paperwork?" I asked, feigning innocent confusion. "The background check, Julia. We talked about this," Waylon snapped, his voice rising in volume. Victoria flinched slightly at his tone, but quickly stepped forward, placing a hand on my arm. "Julia, please, just do what he asks. He's incredibly stressed about this new merger. It's a very sensitive time for his firm." I looked at my sister, taking in her exhausted eyes and the forced, brittle smile on her face. "Which firm is that, Victoria? Is it Vanguard Holdings, or is it Apex Solutions out of Nevada?" The kitchen went dead silent. The only sound was the bubbling of the forgotten risotto on the stove. Waylon's face drained of color. What did you just say?" "Apex Solutions," I repeated, enunciating every syllable clearly. "The shell company that was dissolved by the state of Nevada 2 years ago due to massive, unpaid tax liens. The one you told Mother was currently funding your lifestyle." I hadn't received the full report from Sarah yet, but Marcus had done a preliminary search and found the dissolved company in minutes. I decided to drop the breadcrumb just to watch him squirm. Waylon's entire demeanor shifted. The faux-friendly brother-in-law vanished, replaced by a snarling, panicked animal. He took a step toward me, pointing a trembling finger in my face. "You listen to me, you paranoid little freak," Waylon hissed, his voice dropping to a vicious whisper. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You sit in your dark apartment typing on keyboards, thinking you know how the real world works. I build empires. You are nothing but a glorified secretary. You will go home, you will lift that freeze, and you will stay out of my business, or I swear to God. Or you'll what, Waylon? I challenged, not backing down an inch. Waylon, stop it, Victoria cried out, stepping between us, her eyes wide with panic. Julia, why are you doing this? Why are you always trying to ruin everything? You're just jealous. You've always been jealous of my husband, of my life. Liliana marched into the kitchen, her face a mask of furious indignation. Julia, apologize to Waylon this instant. How dare you come into his home and make these ridiculous, slanderous accusations? You are an embarrassment to this family. You always have been. Get out. Get out until you can learn some respect. I looked at the three of them, the thief, the enabler, and the victim who refused to see her own chains. I'm leaving, I said calmly. Enjoy the risotto, but Waylon, that freeze is permanent. Find someone else to pay for your empire. I turned and walked out the front door, Waylon's enraged shouting echoing behind me. The first crack in his foundation had been made. Now, it was time to bring down the whole house. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of precise, calculated action. While Waylon frantically bombarded my phone with alternating voicemails of tearful apologies and unhinged, screaming threats, I was finalizing the closing documents for my new home. I sat in a sleek, glass-walled conference room at the title agency, signing my name with a heavy, gold pen. The sovereign penthouse was officially mine. It was 3,000 square feet of floor-to-ceiling windows, imported marble, and sweeping views of the city skyline. It was a fortress built from my own resilience. As soon as the keys were in my hand, I set the second phase of my plan into motion. I hired a premium event planning company to organize a spectacular, catered housewarming party for the following week. I ordered floral arrangements, a live jazz quartet, and a gourmet menu. I meticulously curated the guest list. My colleagues, my mentors, the friends who had actually supported me through my illnesses and long hours, and several high-profile tech executives I had consulted for. Conspicuously absent from the list were Liliana, Victoria, and Waylon. The day before the party, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Sarah, the private investigator, holding a massive, thick manila envelope. She had sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that I immediately respected. You were right to trust your instincts, Julia, Sarah said, handing over the heavy file. Your brother-in-law is a ghost, and not a good one. His real name is William Vance. Waylon is a fabricated identity he started using 5 years ago after he fled a massive civil judgment in Florida. I took the envelope to my kitchen counter and opened it. The contents were nauseating. Page after page of court documents, bank statements, and witness testimonies. He has 2 ex-wives, Sarah explained, leaning against the counter. He completely drained the retirement accounts of the first one by forging her signature on a secondary mortgage. The second wife, he convinced to take out massive personal loans for a business that never existed. They both had to declare bankruptcy. Furthermore, he has 0 assets. The luxury cars are leased in your sister's name. The rent on their house is 3 months past due. And that investor firm he works for. It's a mail drop box at a UPS store. My stomach churned, a mixture of absolute vindication and profound sorrow for my sister. Victoria was foolish, vain, and cruel to me, but she was still my sister. She was being systemically destroyed by a predator. I have everything I need, I told Sarah, thanking her and paying her invoice. Barely an hour after Sarah left, there was a frantic, hammering knock at my door. I looked through the peephole. It was Victoria. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup was smudged, and she was crying hysterically. I unlocked the door, and she pushed past me, practically collapsing onto my sofa. He's going to leave me, Julia, Victoria sobbed, burying her face in her hands. Waylon is packing his bags. He says you ruined his life. He says the bank pulled the funding for his massive project because of your credit freeze, and now he owes dangerous people money. Why did you do this? Why couldn't you just help him? I sat down next to her, keeping a careful distance. Victoria, listen to me. There is no project, there is no funding. He is lying to you. Stop it, she screamed, looking up at me with wild, furious eyes. You don't understand him. He's a visionary. The market is just tough right now. He told me you've always hated him because he's successful and you're just a lonely, bitter woman. I reached onto the coffee table and picked up a single document from Sarah's file, a finalized bankruptcy court decree from Florida listing William Vance and his first wife. I held it out to her. His name isn't Waylon. It's William. Look at this, Victoria, just look at it. He did the exact same thing to 2 other women. He was trying to use my signature to buy a house he could never afford, and when it foreclosed, he was going to leave us both holding the debt. Victoria stared at the paper in my hand as if it were a venomous snake. Her eyes scanned the bold text at the top, the official seals, the name William Vance. For a split second, I saw the truth register in her eyes, a terrifying, earth-shattering realization of her own ruin. But the human mind is a fragile thing, and the prospect of admitting that her entire perfect life was a pathetic lie was simply too much for her to bear. She violently slapped the paper out of my hand. It fluttered to the floor between us. "This is fake," she shrieked, standing up so fast she nearly knocked over the coffee table. "You made this on your computer. You're a hacker. You can make anything look real. You are sick, Julia. You are deeply, desperately sick. Mother was right about you. You want to destroy my happiness because you have none of your own." She ran toward the door, turning back to look at me with absolute, unadulterated hatred. "Don't ever speak to me again. You are not my sister." She slammed the door behind her, leaving me alone in the quiet apartment. I looked down at the bankruptcy decree lying on the hardwood floor. I had tried to give her the truth in private. I had tried to spare her the ultimate humiliation. But she chose the lie. She chose the parasite. They had spent my entire life calling me an embarrassment, diminishing my worth, and treating me like a stepping stone. I picked up the paper, placing it carefully back into the thick manila folder. The private warnings were over. If Victoria and Liliana refused to see the truth in the shadows, I would drag it out into the blinding, unforgiving light. The stage was set at the Sover. Ain, the trap was fully armed, and the embarrassment they were about to experience would be legendary. The evening of the party arrived, painting the city skyline in brilliant shades of bruised purple and burning gold. My new penthouse at the Sovereign was alive with the soft, sophisticated hum of genuine celebration. I had hired a phenomenal jazz quartet, their smooth melodies drifting over the custom marble island in the kitchen and out onto the sprawling glass balcony. Servers in crisp white uniforms circulated with trays of seared scallops, truffle crostini, and crystal flutes of vintage champagne. For the first time in my entire life, I was surrounded solely by people who respected my mind, valued my contributions, and celebrated my success without any ulterior motives. My colleague David from engineering was laughing heartily near the floor-to-ceiling windows, gesturing toward the horizon. Beside him stood Marcus, the formidable corporate attorney who had helped me unravel the tangled web of my brother-in-law's deceit. I wore a stunning emerald green silk dress that draped perfectly, a far cry from the drab, oversized sweaters Liliana always insisted suited my bland personality. I felt radiant. I felt impenetrable. I knew they would find out. I had deliberately asked a few of my more socially active colleagues to post videos and photos of the venue on their public social media accounts, making sure to tag my name and the location. It was the digital equivalent of leaving a trail of breadcrumbs, and I knew Victoria, who spent half her life curating her online image, would take the bait. At exactly 8:30, the heavy brass doors of the private elevator that opened directly into my foyer chimed with a soft, melodic ring. The low hum of conversation near the entrance abruptly ceased. I turned my attention away from David, setting my champagne flute down on a sleek glass side table. My heart hammered a steady, powerful rhythm against my ribs, but my hands were completely still. The doors slid apart, revealing Liliana, Victoria, and Waylon. They looked entirely out of place, a chaotic intrusion into my carefully curated sanctuary. Liliana's eyes were wide, darting frantically over the imported chandeliers, the modern art on the walls, and the affluent crowd staring back at them. She wore a heavy scowl, her face flushed with a mixture of confusion and profound indignation. Victoria looked utterly bewildered, clinging tightly to Waylon's arm. Waylon himself looked like a cornered rat, his eyes darting hungrily across the expensive fixtures, rapidly calculating the sheer monetary value of the space he had just entered. "Julia," Liliana's voice pierced through the soft jazz music, sharp and reprimanding. She marched out of the elevator, her heels clicking aggressively against the marble floor. "What is the meaning of this? Whose home is this? Are you house-sitting for one of your tech employers? And why on earth are you throwing a party without inviting your own flesh and blood?" The sheer audacity of her entitlement hung in the air. The jazz quartet, sensing the intense shift in the room's energy, slowly stopped playing. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. Dozens of my friends and colleagues turned to watch the spectacle. I walked slowly toward the center of the living room, closing the distance between us. I did not shrink. I did not apologize. "I am not house-sitting, Mother," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the vast room, calm and unshakable. "I own it. I closed on this penthouse 3 days ago. I paid for it in cash, using the money I earned from the career you have spent the last decade calling an embarrassment." Liliana stopped dead in her tracks, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. The color completely drained from her face. Waylon, however, recovered his composure with terrifying speed. The hungry gleam in his eyes intensified. He let go of Victoria's arm and stepped forward, adopting his signature, slick salesman smile. He spread his arms wide, acting as if we were the best of friends. "Jules, this is incredible, absolutely phenomenal," Waylon boomed, trying to project a false warmth that made my skin crawl. "I always knew you had a little nest egg tucked away, but this is a prime asset. Listen, we need to let bygones be bygones about that little credit misunderstanding. With the equity you have in this place, we could leverage a line of credit that would completely secure my firm's new acquisition. We could partner up, Julia. Family business." He was standing in a room full of highly successful professionals, attempting to con me out of my home mere days after trying to steal my identity. The sheer, pathological arrogance of it was almost awe-inspiring. "We are not partners, Waylon," I said, my voice dropping to a glacial chill. I turned slightly and caught Marcus's eye. The attorney gave a curt nod and stepped forward from the crowd, holding the thick, heavy manila envelope Sarah had delivered. "Who is this?" Waylon snapped, his smile finally faltering as he looked at Marcus's tailored suit and sharp, uncompromising expression. "This is my attorney, Marcus," I announced to the room. I turned my gaze back to Waylon, pinning him down. "And he is the one who helped me uncover exactly who you are, William Vance." Waylon flinched violently, as if he had been physically struck. The false bravado shattered instantly. "What did you just call him?" Victoria asked, her voice trembling as she stepped forward, looking between me and her husband. "Julia, stop this. Stop embarrassing us in front of these people." "I am not embarrassing you, Victoria. I am saving you," I said softly, before raising my voice so every person in the room could hear the absolute truth. I took the envelope from Marcus and pulled out the thick stack of documents. "Your husband's real name is William Vance," I declared, holding up the bankruptcy decree for the room to see. "He fled Florida 5 years ago to escape a massive civil judgment for fraud. He has 2 ex-wives. He financially ruined both of them by forging their signatures on secondary mortgages and draining their retirement accounts, exactly like he tried to do to me last week." "Shut up," Waylon roared, his face turning a mottled, furious red. He lunged forward, but David and another colleague instantly stepped in front of me, forming a physical barrier. Waylon stopped, breathing heavily, his fists clenched at his sides. "He does not work for an investment firm," I continued, my voice steady and relentless, reading from the investigator's summary. His company is a mail drop box at a UPS store. The luxury cars you drive, Victoria, are leased solely in your name. He hasn't paid the rent on your house in 3 months. He has absolutely no money. He is a parasite, and when he couldn't use my credit to buy a multi-million-dollar estate to keep up his charade, he was preparing to leave you to take the fall. Lies, it's all fabricated nonsense. Waylon screamed, spittle flying from his lips. He turned to the crowd, his eyes wild and desperate. She's insane. She's a jealous, bitter spinster who hacked some documents to ruin my life. He turned aggressively to Victoria, grabbing her tightly by the upper arm. We are leaving, right now. Come on, Victoria, don't listen to this pathetic loser. He yanked her arm hard. Victoria stumbled forward, crying out in pain. For a moment, she looked entirely broken, a fragile bird caught in a snare. She looked at her mother, but Liliana was frozen, her eyes glued to the legal documents in my hand, the terrifying reality of her own ruined social status finally sinking in. Liliana had worshipped a fraud, and her golden child was married to a monster. Then Victoria looked at me. She saw the unwavering truth in my eyes, the steady, fierce protection I was offering her despite years of cruelty. Waylon yanked her arm again. I said, move, you stupid girl. The derogatory insult, spoken so viciously in front of a silent crowd, was the final strike. The carefully constructed illusion of her perfect marriage shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Victoria stopped crying. Her expression hardened into something I had never seen before, pure, unadulterated outrage. With a sudden, explosive burst of strength, she wrenched her arm out of his grasp. Don't you ever touch me again, Victoria hissed, her voice shaking with raw fury. She took a deliberate, powerful step away from him, placing herself firmly on my side of the room. And don't you ever speak to my sister like that. Waylon stood completely alone in the center of the lavish foyer. He looked at Victoria, then at Liliana, who slowly turned her face away from him in absolute disgust. He looked at the crowd of powerful, wealthy individuals who were watching him with open contempt. The predator had been entirely stripped of his camouflage. He was exposed, humiliated, and utterly powerless. The silence in the room was deafening. Waylon's chest heaved as his eyes darted toward the open elevator doors. He took a hesitant step backward. I wouldn't run, Mr. Vance, Marcus said calmly, adjusting his glasses. His voice was smooth but carried the weight of a falling anvil. While Julia was keeping you occupied, I took the liberty of forwarding the forged mortgage application, along with the evidence of your attempted wire fraud across state lines, directly to the district attorney's office. I believe they have a unit specifically dedicated to habitual financial predators. They should be waiting for you in the lobby right now. Waylon's eyes widened in sheer, animalistic terror. He didn't say another word. He didn't try to defend himself. He simply turned and bolted into the elevator, frantically mashing the button for the lobby. The brass doors slid shut, sealing his fate. As soon as the elevator descended, the heavy suffocating tension in the room finally broke. A collective exhale seemed to ripple through the crowd. My colleagues, displaying immense tact and grace, quietly ushered the caterers back to the kitchen and slowly moved out to the balcony, giving my family the privacy we desperately needed. Victoria collapsed onto one of the plush velvet sofas, burying her face in her hands. Deep, agonizing sobs tore through her chest. Her entire life, her marriage, her perceived wealth, her social standing, had just been eradicated in a matter of minutes. I walked over and sat down beside her. I didn't offer empty platitudes. I simply wrapped my arms tightly around her shaking shoulders, pulling her against me. She leaned into my embrace, clutching the fabric of my silk dress like a lifeline. We sat there for a long time, the only sound in the vast penthouse being her ragged breathing. I looked up and saw Liliana standing awkwardly a few feet away. The haughty, critical woman who had spent my entire life belittling my achievements looked small, fragile, and utterly defeated. She stared at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. I didn't know, Liliana whispered, her voice cracking. It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever heard her speak. I thought you were just. You thought I was the embarrassment, I finished for her, my voice gentle but firm. You chose to believe a polished lie over your own daughter's quiet truth, but that's over now. The truth is out. Over the next few weeks, the fallout was swift and absolute. Waylon was arrested in the lobby of my building and held without bail, given his history of fleeing the state. Marcus ruthlessly took charge of Victoria's legal affairs. We spent hours in his office, slowly untangling the massive web of debt Waylon had secretly built in her name. Using my financial resources and Marcus's aggressive litigation tactics, we managed to freeze the accounts, secure a rapid annulment based on extreme fraud, and shield Victoria from the worst of the creditors. Victoria moved into the guest bedroom of my penthouse. The transition was difficult. There were days of endless tears and profound anger, but stripped of the toxic environment Waylon had created, the sister I used to know slowly began to emerge. Without the constant pressure to project an image of effortless wealth, Victoria became softer, more introspective, and incredibly grateful. She took a modest job as a receptionist at a boutique firm, insisting on paying me a small amount of rent each month to rebuild her own sense of independence. Liliana's transformation was quieter but equally profound. The public humiliation at my party had shattered her country club facade. She stopped making snide comments about my career. She stopped lecturing me about my wardrobe. When she visited the condo, she was polite, reserved, and deeply respectful of my space. The dynamic had fundamentally shifted. I was no longer the scapegoat holding the family together from the shadows. I was the architect of my own life, and they were merely guests in it. On a quiet Sunday morning, nearly 2 months after the party, I woke up early. I walked out into the expansive living room, my bare feet silent against the cool marble. The city below was just beginning to wake up, bathed in the soft, golden light of dawn. I walked into the kitchen to find Victoria already awake, brewing a pot of expensive coffee. She was wearing a simple pair of sweatpants and one of my old, oversized college t-shirts. Her face was entirely free of makeup, and she looked younger, healthier, and more peaceful than she had in years. She poured 2 mugs and handed one to me, offering a genuine, warm smile. "Thank you, Julia," she said softly, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "For everything, I know I didn't deserve it." I took a sip of the coffee, letting the warmth spread through my chest. I looked around my beautiful, secure fortress and then back at my sister. The anger and the grief that had plagued me for so long had completely evaporated, replaced by a deep, enduring sense of peace. I had fought for my sanctuary, and in doing so, I had finally broken the cycle of toxicity that had bound us all. "We're family, Victoria," I said, leaning against the marble counter and looking out at the endless horizon. "We operate on truth now, and that is something no one will ever be able to steal from us again."